Chances are, if you've ever watched a movie or read a book set at sea, you've heard of the deadly scourge of scurvy. Movies like Pirates of the Caribbean aren't renowned for their historical accuracy, but all those pirate stories are right about one thing. Scurvy was a major issue for sailors. Over 2 million mariners died from scurvy between the 16th and mid-19th century, making it the #1 cause of death for anyone on the high seas. Today, many people associate scurvy with life on the high seas, and much of the disease's modern history is seabound. But scurvy has been with us for a long time. So long, in fact, that people have cured scurvy a whole bunch of times, only to forget how they did it. So join us on this expedition across history to talk about the many people who discovered, treated, and then forgot about scurvy. Our story starts more than 3,000 years ago in Egypt. The first written record of scurvy is a long medical text called the Ebers Papyrus. As far back as 1550 BCE, Egyptian doctors recommended curing scurvy by eating onions and vegetables. And this was surprisingly good advice. Because scurvy is caused by a vitamin C deficiency, and onions happen to contain some of the stuff, this treatment would have worked even if it gave the patients terrible onion breath. So right off the bat, we have our first historical evidence of discovering and successfully treating scurvy. But let's backtrack a little bit, because for all the ways that scurvy has caused problems for us in the past, it didn't have to be this way. Most animals make their own vitamin C, and humans are one of the handful of mammals that lost the ability to do this. But we obviously still need vitamin C, also called ascorbic acid, so we've evolved to extract what we need from our diet. You can find vitamin C in all kinds of food. There is citrus, of course, which we will be talking about in greater detail, but it's also in potatoes, tomatoes, cabbage, many green vegetables, strawberries, the list goes on. The average adult needs around 75 to 90 milligrams of vitamin C a day, and most people get all they need from half a cup of red peppers, 150 grams of strawberries, or a solid glass of orange juice. But vitamin C isn't the most stable molecule in the world. It breaks down when exposed to air or water, meaning that when we preserve foods for a long time, the amount of vitamin C that they contain can plummet. So sometimes people end up in situations like, say, a long sea voyage, where they can eat basically nothing containing vitamin C for months at a time. That's a problem, because vitamin C is an essential ingredient in our body's chemistry. The biggest thing it does is help to build and maintain our skin, bones, and connective tissues. It also helps our bodies absorb iron, and it even works as an antioxidant. You know, kind of important stuff. Without enough vitamin C, things start going wrong. This is what scurvy is, and it's not pretty. In the early stages of scurvy, you'll feel kind of tired or irritable, and you may have pain in your joints. If it progresses, you'll start to see rough and scaly skin and swelling in your legs, gums, and arms. You'll see that your injuries won't heal, and old ones might even open up again. You can even lose hair or teeth or develop iron deficiency anemia. Eventually, if nothing changes, you die. So that's not great. The good news is that scurvy is incredibly easy to treat. All you have to do is just chug some vitamin C. And just like Egyptians 3,000 years ago, lots of people throughout history were able to connect those dots. For instance, in the 16th century, scurvy was a major medical issue for the Iroquois living in eastern North America, especially during the winter. But they also worked out that drinking tea from pine needles, which happened to be rich in vitamin C, was a great way to treat the illness. Around the same time, people in Norway treated scurvy by eating cloudberries, by force if necessary. As in, scurvy patients were forced to hang out on isolated islands that had the berries growing on them. I don't see why they needed convincing to eat a bunch of tasty berries, but whatever works. Some scholars also think that Chinese explorers may have used sprouted soybeans to prevent scurvy on long ocean voyages in the 15th century. And while European explorers traversing the Arctic Ocean often died from scurvy during the 19th century, the people actually living in the Arctic Circle rarely experienced the disease. Turns out that they incorporated vitamin C-rich algae into their diets, and the Europeans didn't get the memo. Back at home, the medical establishment of Europe was still struggling struggling to understand why scurvy was happening, let alone how to treat it. This became clear in 1497 when Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama set sail for India, hoping to find a sea route that would connect Europe to India directly and cut out the middlemen traders overland. Da Gama set sail with around 170 men. By the time he got to modern-day Mozambique, many of the crew were suffering from scurvy. Luckily, later in the trip, they met a king who offered the crew oranges, and they suddenly got better. However, Da Gama didn't seem to make the connection between the oranges and the scurvy stuff. A few years later, his crew once again developed scurvy, and the crew asked for more oranges, but Da Gama was like, "We have oranges at home," and by oranges, he probably meant hardtack. Actually, he thought scurvy was caused by something in the air, which may be why he didn't ensure that the crew's cries for citrus were answered. Around 100 men died of scurvy during that trip, and at some point, scurvy even claimed the life of his brother. Scurvy became the leading cause of death for sailors for the next few centuries, which sadly does make sense. Crews rarely had access to fresh fruits or vegetables during long stretches of their ocean voyage, so they mostly ate salted and preserved foods, and any vitamin C they may have once contained would be diminished or even gone completely. But physicians at the time didn't know that. So pretty much every medical expert in Europe developed their own theory about what causes scurvy and never made the connection between switching from fresh to dried foods. Some thought it was caused by an infectious poison. Others argued that the illness was caused by bad air or constipation, or that it was inherited. Some people even thought that the sailors who had scurvy were just lazy and depressed, so the cure was to just make them stop being so lazy and depressed. A strategy that famously always works. As many ideas as there were for causes, there were an equal number of proposed cures. It should be noted that throughout all of this, some people did still think that the answer was in their diets. As far back as 1622, an English captain argued that lemons and oranges were the way to treat scurvy. Well, actually what he wrote was, "That which I have seen most fruitful for this sickness is sour oranges and lemons." Some British Navy surgeons at the time were even prescribing lemon juice as a preventative, but for some reason, this was abandoned by large organizations like the East India Company in the 1630s. Ships that did try to bring fruits and vegetables aboard often used the dried variety, which, of course, lost most of their vitamin C in the preservation process. And for whatever reason, when the scurvy issue popped back up again, they just didn't implement the very easy and accessible cure of packing a few lemons for the road. Hop ahead 100 years to 1734, when a Dutch physician called Johann Bachstrom argued that scurvy was due solely to a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables. His work has traditionally not made it into the story of scurvy because it wasn't translated into English until recently. So in the absence of a good translator, the English-speaking world was out of ideas for dealing with their scurvy woes, which brings us to James Lind. But before we can get into that, we need to be able to buy our crew their rations of citrus, so here's a quick ad break.
Thanks to our longtime sponsor, Brilliant, for supporting this SciShow video. Brilliant is an interactive online learning platform with lessons that stick with you. You know how you learned to take an integral in school, and then you learned it again because you forgot it? That's what happens when you memorize information and never put it into context. Brilliant takes a different approach. They give you real-world data to manipulate and apply your new skills. With Brilliant, you think critically, solve problems, and actually remember what you learn. So don't forget where to find Brilliant at brilliant.org/scishow, the QR code on screen, or the link in the video description. It comes with 20% off an annual premium subscription.
Any history of scurvy in the English-speaking world will at some point need to talk about James Lind, and he's important outside the world of scurvy too, because while he was studying the disease in 1747, Lind ran the first actual controlled clinical trial, ever. Lind treated 12 sailors suffering from scurvy with one of 6 theorized treatments. They looked at something called elixir of vitriol, garlic and mustard paste, cider, vinegar, seawater, and finally, a diet of oranges and lemons. This was the first well-documented instance of a researcher trying different protocols on test subjects to see which worked. Lind concluded that the 2 men on the citrus treatment had the fastest recovery. Because of this, he's usually credited with being the guy who worked out once and for all that scurvy is caused by a dietary deficiency that can be solved by eating citrus. But here's what's odd. Even though his study showed that the citrus group did the best, Lind didn't actually think that a lack of citrus was the sole cause of scurvy. Instead, he blamed humidity. As evidence, he went on to argue that nobody gets scurvy in dry places, which isn't true. But he did argue it. This might help explain why it took another 50 years for the British Navy to incorporate citrus into their rations. And even when they did, the argument over what caused scurvy was far from over. In the meantime, scurvy remained an issue, including for people on land. For instance, the Irish potato famine. When potato crops failed and the British refused to provide fresh food rations to the people of Ireland, many of the people killed developed scurvy before they died. Over in the United States, around 7,000 Union soldiers died of scurvy during the Civil War, and thousands of prospectors during the California gold rushes of the 19th century also perished from scurvy. It was a mess. But it wasn't just the adults who'd get it. Scurvy was common in urban-dwelling children alongside rickets, which is caused by a vitamin D deficiency. And at the tail end of the 19th century, city kids were getting scurvy at least partially due to pasteurization of dairy, since heating it up to kill those nasty pathogens also breaks down the small amount of vitamin C in the milk. It is still very much worth it to have your milk pasteurized. Just have some strawberries also. I think this makes strawberry milkshakes a health food, though. Scientists studying these events eventually concluded that scurvy must be caused by some sort of dietary deficiency. A lot went into this, but the final conclusive study that proved the connection was made possible thanks to guinea pigs. Remember how humans can't make vitamin C? Well, turns out neither can guinea pigs. In 1907, Norwegian researchers were studying a disease that they called ship beriberi, which may have just actually been scurvy. Both beriberi and scurvy are nutrition related, so by studying the ways that nutrients affect these diseases, they happen to be on the right track either way. What they found is that when they gave guinea pigs a diet of bread and grain, sort of like what you'd get on a long sea voyage, the guinea pigs developed signs of scurvy. But supplementing their diet with lemon juice and cabbages cured them of their ailment. The researchers just happened to pick guinea pigs for their experiment, which was lucky because if they'd picked a different model organism, they might not have been able to give them scurvy at all. Their paper helped establish the idea that scurvy was caused by a dietary deficiency, and whatever the chemical was, it was in things like lemon juice. People started looking for the mysterious chemical, later dubbed vitamin C, and it took 20 years to track it down. In 1930, a Hungarian chemist named Albert St. Georgi was trying to discover the anti-scurvy chemical. The problem is that citrus and other fruits are so full of sugar that researchers really struggled to isolate any other chemicals from their experiments. But lucky for science, St. Georgi was from the region of Szeged, which is known for their love of paprika, both as a fresh red pepper and dried and pulverized into the spice we all know and love. One day, St. Georgi's wife served him a lovingly made dinner featuring paprika. Apparently, he wasn't really feeling it, so as he pondered how not to eat his wife's lovely cooking, he started to wonder if maybe paprika would be a good place to look for the vitamin. He packed his dinner to go and brought it to the lab, and sure enough, he was able to isolate the elusive molecule. And when they fed it to their scurvy-ridden guinea pigs, they got better. After thousands of years, humans had finally found the root cause of scurvy, all thanks to a man not wanting to eat his wife's cooking. Frankly, she deserves as much credit for the discovery of vitamin C as he does. St. Georgi won a Nobel Prize for his work, which opened up the possibility of treating scurvy wherever it popped up from then on. Today, while scurvy is rare in developed countries, it's not entirely gone. Certain illnesses, like Crohn's, can make it harder for people to absorb vitamin C, and others, like diabetes, may require cutting out certain food groups that are vitamin C powerhouses. So some people who still eat a varied diet can end up sick as a sea dog. And scurvy continues to be a risk for people who are malnourished. 20% of refugees in camps in Sudan and Somalia in the 1980s developed scurvy, and researchers estimated that it was even more common in the population at large. Even in 2017, doctors report scurvy cases in refugee camps in the region, which is something that aid groups have tried to address. At the very least, thanks to hundreds of years of hard work, they definitely know what can be done about the issue. So that's the long and meandering tale of the many times we've discovered, forgotten, and then rediscovered the cure to scurvy. And if the people of the future ever forget about vitamin C again, hopefully this video will be around to remind them to eat their fruits and vegetables.